What I am about to tell you in the next 10 minutes is going to make you question everything you thought you understood about where the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef is heading, because we have officially crossed the threshold from internet entertainment into something that I genuinely believe is going to end with somebody in a hospital, a courtroom, or worse. And nobody in a position of cultural power is doing a single thing to stop it. If you have been anywhere near hip-hop internet in the last 72 hours, you already felt the ground shaking. But what you probably have not seen yet is how two separate clips, when you watch them back to back, reveal a pattern so undeniable that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Before I break it all the way down, do me a favor and tap that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and turn on notifications, because what we are about to unpack is the kind of story that is going to make you sit up in your chair and maybe even rethink how you have been consuming this entire feud from the sidelines. Now, let me paint the picture for you, because the details matter here. Every single detail matters. A streaming collective known as KODE, a group of young content creators who have been riding the wave of the Drake and Kendrick Lamar feud for engagement material, decided that the next logical step in their content calendar was to physically drive to what they believed was Kendrick Lamar's personal residence in Los Angeles. Not a pop-up at a concert venue, not a meet and greet outside a studio, not a fan encounter at a restaurant. The man's home, the place where Kendrick Lamar lives with his family, the place where his children sleep, the place where, on any given Tuesday evening, Kendrick Lamar is probably decompressing from being one of the most dissected human beings on the planet. And these streamers looked at that location and said, yes, that is where we need to take our cameras tonight. The footage itself is something I had to watch more than once to fully process, because the layers of miscalculation stacked on top of each other are genuinely staggering. They pull up in a caravan of vehicles, phones already recording before the doors even open, because of course the entire exercise is content from frame one. Nobody is there to say hello. Nobody is there to pay respects. Nobody is there to drop off a gift or a fan letter. They are there to manufacture a viral moment on Kendrick Lamar's doorstep, and they want every second of it captured for the algorithm. The first thing one of them does is approach the intercom and announce that he has a message for Kendrick Lamar. The message, as he frames it, is that Kendrick Lamar caused Drake stress during the diss track cycle, and now they have arrived at Kendrick Lamar's home to collect some kind of cosmic debt on behalf of an artist who has never heard of them, has never met them, and almost certainly has never watched a single second of their content. The audacity of that framing alone is worth pausing on, because what it reveals is a psychological posture that goes far beyond fandom. These individuals genuinely believe they are operating as emissaries. They genuinely believe that rolling up to Kendrick Lamar's private residence and banging on his door constitutes some form of legitimate retaliation in a rap beef that they have no actual stake in. And then it gets worse. Because the escalation ladder in this footage is a textbook case study in how group dynamics and camera pressure combine to push people past every rational boundary they would normally observe. They start pounding on the door. They start shouting through the intercom. One of them pretends to be a DoorDash delivery driver. Another one pretends to be dropping off a package. Another one starts calling out Kendrick Lamar by his government name in the most deliberately provocative tone he can manufacture, stacking the disrespect one layer on top of another like they are building a tower of provocation on a stranger's front porch. They know that silence does not perform well on camera. They know that a video with no drama does not retain viewers. They know that the algorithm rewards peaks and stakes and escalation. So they manufacture all of it, right there on Kendrick Lamar's front step, using somebody else's property as their personal content studio. And then the moment that crystallizes the entire absurdity of this stunt arrives. One of these young men actually looks up and notices a surveillance camera tucked into the branches of a tree on the property. A camera in a tree. And that detail tells you one of two things, and both of those things are terrible news for our streamers. Either this is not actually Kendrick Lamar's residence, in which case they are harassing a completely unrelated homeowner who is about to have the most terrifying evening of their life for absolutely zero reason. Or this is Kendrick Lamar's residence, in which case the man has clearly anticipated that people would attempt stunts like this, and he has fortified his perimeter accordingly. Either way, somebody's face is now on file. Either way, this footage exists as evidence. Either way, the legal implications of what they are doing are stacking up with every passing second. Now, before I continue, I want to be transparent about something because I do not want anyone in the comments to accuse me of presenting speculation as verified fact. I cannot confirm with 100% certainty that the property in this footage is Kendrick Lamar's actual residence. I am not the county recorder. I am not the tax assessor. I cannot pull property deeds on camera. What I can tell you is that these streamers clearly believed it was Kendrick Lamar's home. That belief was the entire foundation of their content strategy. That belief was what they were selling to their audience, to the algorithm, and to the portion of the internet they were trying to impress. And in the economy of viral content, the belief is the product. The belief is the currency. Whether it is factually accurate or not is almost beside the point, because the damage is done the moment the camera starts rolling and the address is broadcast. Here is where the footage takes a turn that I think everyone needs to sit with for a moment, because this is the point where the content meets the consequences. A vehicle pulls onto the property. A figure exits the vehicle. And according to multiple reports from people who have analyzed this clip frame by frame, this individual appears to be connected to Kendrick Lamar's personal security apparatus. The energy in the footage shifts instantaneously. All of that bravado, all of that door pounding, intercom shouting, government name calling energy compresses into something visibly smaller and visibly more nervous. One of them mutters into the camera that he cannot run. Another one is visibly shaken. Another one begins walking backward without turning around, which is the physical vocabulary of a person who is realizing in real time that they may have catastrophically misjudged the situation they just walked into. And I need to say this clearly, because it applies whether we are talking about Kendrick Lamar or any human being on this planet. You do not roll up on a stranger's residence in the United States of America in this cultural climate with your face on camera, banging on doors, shouting through intercoms, and reasonably expect the interaction to conclude peacefully. That is not how the physics of this country operate. That is not how the physics of any country operate. There are people in this nation who carry firearms. There are people who have security protocols. There are people who have been traumatized by previous home invasion experiences. You do not know who is behind that door. You do not know what their week has been. You do not know what state of mind they are in. And when you gamble on that ignorance for a clip, the odds are not in your favor. Not on a long enough timeline. Not with the volume of stunts being filmed every single week across this country. But here is the part of this footage that actually made me pause the video and sit in silence for a solid minute, because it reveals the psychological engine driving this entire operation more clearly than anything else in the clip. One of these young men suggests that they should tell whoever answers the door that they were sent by Aubrey. Sent by Aubrey. For those who may not know, Aubrey is Drake's government name. Aubrey Graham. And these individuals were prepared to invoke Drake's actual name as the alleged sponsor of their late-night trespass at Kendrick Lamar's residence. Let me break down why that is catastrophically stupid on every conceivable level. If Drake did not send them, and I have zero evidence that he did, then they are putting words in the mouth of a global superstar who has a legal team that does not take kindly to unauthorized representation. If Drake did send them, which again I have no evidence of, then they are implicating one of the most famous artists on earth in what could be characterized as harassment or trespassing. Either way, the person who thought that was a clever line should have kept it in the group chat, because it is now part of the permanent record. What that moment reveals, though, is the delusion operating underneath this entire stunt. These individuals believe that invoking Drake's name gives them legitimacy. They believe it transforms what they are doing from a random late-night trespass into an official mission from headquarters, delivered by loyal soldiers on authorized business. That is the fantasy. That is the fiction they are living inside. And that fiction is not harmless, because delusion is not a passive state. Delusion is a motor. Delusion moves people to take action. Delusion produces footage. Delusion is what gets people into situations that end with police reports, restraining orders, or worse. And let me be honest about the broader dynamic here, because I have been watching this entire beef and all of its various side quests unfold for a long time now, and I am starting to notice something that goes beyond individual incidents. I am starting to notice a pattern, not a coincidence, not a one-off, not a random anomaly, a pattern, a trend line, a repeating shape in the culture. Certain types of behavior keep cropping up from a certain corner of the fandom, and it keeps escalating with each new week. Every week, it is a new stunt. Every week the temperature ticks up another degree. Every week the line moves a little further out into dangerous territory. And when you zoom out and look at the full mosaic of the last 6 months of content, you start to see something ugly forming underneath all the engagement farming. It is less we love our artist and want to celebrate him, and more we need to be seen by our artist, and we will do anything to catch his eye. And that distinction is the whole ballgame, because when your motivation is being seen rather than celebrating, you will cross any line. You will harass any stranger. You will show up at any address. You will put yourself in situations that a level-headed adult would never even consider stepping into. Now, let me read you some of the community reactions to this clip, because I want you to notice something as I go through these. I want you to notice that the response is not split down the middle. It is not a coin flip. It is not half defending and half condemning. Every single person who watched this footage arrived at the same conclusion, and that conclusion is that this is indefensible. Somebody wrote that this is what happens when your artist attracts a younger, chronically online fan base. Somebody else wrote that these are the shooters Drake is always rapping about in his records, questioning the disconnect between the image and the reality. Somebody wrote, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Somebody wrote that when Kendrick Lamar supporters do something even a fraction as reckless as this, the entire internet forms a mob within the hour, but when the energy comes from the other direction, it is crickets. Somebody wrote, imagine ending up on the wrong side of a police report for Drake, of all people. Somebody wrote that the same fan base that calls other people corny is out here pulling stunts like this. Somebody wrote that this is the kind of behavior that ends careers before they start. Somebody wrote that they do not even ride for Kendrick Lamar, and this still made them embarrassed for the entire culture. And somebody wrote what might be the most precise diagnosis of the whole situation, that this is what parasocial delusion looks like when it graduates from a comment section to a camera. That unanimity is the tell. In a culture war as heated as this one, unanimity is rare. When you see everybody, regardless of which artist they support, arriving at the same verdict, that is when you know a line has been crossed that should not have been crossed. That is when you know the behavior itself has become indefensible. There is no counter-narrative being constructed. There is no organized defense being mounted. Even the neutral parties, even the people who do not care about Drake or Kendrick Lamar either way, are looking at this and saying, no, this is too much. This crossed the line. All right, now I need to set up the second half of this breakdown, because this is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. I need you to think back to a moment that happened roughly 2 years ago, maybe closer to 3 depending on how you count the timeline. Some of y'all will remember this immediately. There was an incident outside Drake's own compound in Toronto. A security guard was shot. It was a serious, genuinely frightening moment that made everyone in the culture pause and take stock of how far this thing had gone. And to this day, there has never been a definitive, court-verified, publicly published answer about who was responsible or exactly why it happened. But the aftermath of that incident cast a long shadow over everything that followed. At that time, the immediate conversation pointed toward Kendrick Lamar's side of the aisle. There was speculation. There was blame. There was heat directed at anyone perceived to be aligned with Kendrick Lamar in that particular city. And whether that blame was fair or unfair, and I am not here to relitigate that question tonight, the pattern of blame was set. It was established. It was carved into the culture's memory. And now, watching the current stunts unfold in real time, I cannot help but notice something that I think is critically important for everyone to understand. The direction of the aggression has fully reversed since then, but the coverage of that aggression has not caught up. The energy is now flowing in the opposite direction. The doorstep stunts, the confrontations, the videos of people yelling at strangers over song choices, the public assaults over portable speakers, all of that is now coming from one specific direction. And that direction is being extended significantly more grace than the opposite direction ever received. More benefit of the doubt. More boys will be boys energy. Less accountability journalism. That is what I mean when I say I am seeing a pattern. That is what I mean when I say a trend line is forming underneath all the noise. And the second clip I am about to walk you through is the one that finally convinced me this is more than coincidence. This second clip is not funny. There is no punchline. There is no comic timing. There is no content strategy visible in the footage. It is real-world aggression happening to a real-world stranger in broad daylight in a busy public area, And the entire trigger for that aggression is the simple fact that a Kendrick Lamar record was being played out loud within earshot of the wrong people. Let me set the scene. We are in Toronto. Big crowd. Public sidewalk. Ordinary evening. Somebody has a portable speaker and they are playing music. That is it. That is the entire crime being committed. A person is playing music on a personal speaker on a public sidewalk during an evening walk. And a group of individuals rolls up on this person and starts yelling. They demand that the music be turned off immediately. They start hurling threats. They invoke territorial ownership over the block. Do not play Kendrick Lamar in this city. Do not play Kendrick Lamar around here. Do not play Kendrick Lamar in these streets. Do not play Kendrick Lamar where we can hear it. And then they escalate. They physically grab the speaker out of the person's hands. They yank it away. They throw it across the sidewalk. And when the owner goes to pick it back up, they attack him. Multiple attackers on one person in broad daylight over a song choice. I need to pause on that, because the absurdity of it needs to land before we move forward. We are now at a point in this cultural cycle where a citizen cannot play a song on their own personal speaker on their own personal evening walk without getting physically assaulted by a group of strangers. That is not a beef. That is not a feud. That is not a rap battle. That is a public safety crisis. That is a slow-motion escalation ladder that started with witty diss tracks in a recording booth and has now landed on somebody's body on a sidewalk in a real city. And the reason it landed there, in my assessment, is because for months on end, certain influencers, certain streamers, certain podcast hosts, and certain corners of the internet have been signaling, through language, through jokes, through territorial claims, through repeated framing, that this kind of aggression is acceptable, that it is part of the fun, that it is a natural extension of the rap beef, that it is the price of having strong opinions about music in a hot cultural moment. And I have to call it what it is, because if I do not call it out on this platform, I am part of the problem. It is not part of the game. It never was part of the game. A rap beef between two artists at the level of Drake and Kendrick Lamar is a spectator sport. It is not a call to arms. It is not an invitation to hunt strangers who happen to enjoy the wrong artist on a Saturday evening. And any influencer, any streamer, any personality, any commentator who has been quietly laundering this energy into the mainstream needs to sit down and take a hard look at what they have been platforming. Because the receipts are stacking up higher every single week. The pattern is undeniable at this point. And somewhere along the way, the fun stopped being fun. The joke stopped being a joke. The bit stopped being a bit. And we are standing in the middle of the consequences right now. Let me read you some of the reactions to this Toronto footage, because just like the first clip, the community response was unanimous. Somebody wrote that the same city that had a whole stadium chanting for Kendrick Lamar's records is now the same city where people are getting jumped for playing Kendrick Lamar out loud, and asked someone to make that make sense. Somebody wrote that this is a cornball practicing his tough guy audition on an easy target. Somebody wrote that Drake had a whole embarrassment in Toronto last year when a sold-out stadium screamed encore for Kendrick Lamar's records, and this is the sequel nobody asked for. Somebody wrote that the aggressor did not even sound tough. He sounded like he was reading from a script somebody handed him. Somebody wrote that the same fan base that calls other people goofy is pulling stunts like this. Somebody wrote that this is not fandom. This is a personality disorder wearing a jersey. Somebody wrote, imagine assaulting a stranger over an artist who does not know you and would probably ask you to stop if he did. And somebody wrote what I think is the most cutting observation of all, that neither Kendrick Lamar nor Drake sent these people. And this is just cowards using a rap beef as a cover story for being aggressive in public. And once again, the response is unanimous. Nobody is defending the aggressor. Nobody is writing think pieces about how this was actually a righteous cause. Nobody is spinning it. The people who watched this clip, regardless of which artist they ride for, all landed in the same place. And that place is, this is out of pocket. This is beyond corny. This is genuinely dangerous. And somebody is going to get seriously hurt if this pattern continues at its current velocity. Now, let me be crystal clear about my own position, because I do not want anyone twisting my words in the comments and trying to spin this into something it is not. I do not co-sign violence. I do not co-sign confrontations. I do not co-sign attacks over music. I do not want to see anyone get jumped over a song, and I do not want to see anyone get assaulted for playing the wrong record at the wrong time. That is my position, and I will repeat it as many times as necessary. But at the same time, I am not naive. I have lived in the real world long enough to know that when you keep pushing an escalation ladder in one direction, eventually somebody at the top of that ladder is going to push back. And when that pushback finally arrives, it is rarely proportional to what triggered it. That is the tragedy of the pattern I am describing tonight. The first few incidents are silly. The middle incidents are concerning. And the eventual incident, the one that finally breaks into the actual news cycle, the one that gets covered on cable news, the one that ends up as a documentary, that one is catastrophic. And by the time we arrive there, it is too late to walk any of it back. It is too late to apologize. It is too late to unfilm the video. It is too late to unbroadcast the address. That is why I keep saying, you are dancing on live wires around this situation. And by this situation, I do not necessarily mean Kendrick Lamar specifically. I mean any human being whose peace you decide to disrupt for a viral moment. You do not know who they are. You do not know what they have going on. You do not know what their week has looked like. You do not know if they have a permit, a partner, a plan, a pre-existing reason to be on edge. You do not know. And when you gamble on that ignorance for a clip, the odds are not in your favor. Let me zoom back out to Kendrick Lamar for a second, because I think the framing on him in these stunts has been off from the very beginning. Kendrick Lamar is not a small artist. Kendrick Lamar is not an unknown quantity. Kendrick Lamar is not a rookie trying to catch a wave. Kendrick Lamar is a Pulitzer Prize-winning, Super Bowl headlining, culture-shaping, generation-defining figure. When you decide to roll up on Kendrick Lamar's alleged doorstep as a joke, as a stunt, as a bit, as a piece of content, as anything at all, you are volunteering yourself into a set of consequences that a random streamer with 3,000 subscribers is not equipped to handle. Kendrick Lamar has legal representation. Kendrick Lamar has private security. Kendrick Lamar has label backing. Kendrick Lamar has a documented history of not entertaining foolishness in his personal life. So the risk-reward calculus on this stunt is upside down before the car even pulls into the driveway. The upside is a few thousand views on a channel that was already struggling. The downside is a criminal record, a civil suit, a restraining order, or something worse. And here's the part that really gets to me the more I sit with it. These individuals think they are being brave. They think they are being cheeky. They think they are being clever. They think they are pulling off the content coup of the year. But brave is not the correct word for what they are actually doing. Brave is confronting somebody your own size on equal terms in a fair setting. Brave is putting your name on your convictions in the daylight when there is a cost involved. What these individuals are doing is the opposite of brave. They are farming engagement by disrupting a stranger's peace, hiding behind the numbers of a group, and then bragging about it once they have retreated to a safe distance. That is not bravery. That is cosplay. That is a costume. That is a role they read about online and decided to try on for an evening. And costumes do not stop bullets. Costumes do not stop lawsuits. Costumes do not stop consequences. Costumes come off in the morning, and the person underneath still has to face whatever is waiting for them. So what happens next in this entire saga? Because that is the real question. That is the question we should all be sitting with tonight. The pattern is escalating. The stunts are getting bolder. The public confrontations are getting more physical. The doorstep visits are getting closer to the actual door. The confrontations are getting closer to actual violence. And nobody with a real platform is pumping the brakes on any of it. The influencers who reposted the ding-dong ditch clip laughed at it and moved on to the next topic. The streamers who covered the Toronto footage treated it like a highlight reel. The comment sections are full of outrage, for sure, but outrage does not stop the next clip from being filmed. Outrage does not stop the next escalation from getting approved in somebody's group chat at 2 in the morning. Now, I want to pause here and make something clear, because I do not want anybody in the comments to twist my words on this. I am not saying Kendrick Lamar supporters are angels either. Every fandom has its obsessive corner. Every fandom has its terminally online contingent. Every fandom has its unhinged extremists. Kendrick Lamar supporters have them. Drake supporters have them. Nicki fans have them. J. Cole fans have them. Every single artist attracts a certain kind of obsessive attachment, and I have been on record about that dynamic for years now. But what I am watching right now from this one specific corner of the culture has a distinct flavor. It has a specific texture. It has a signature move set that separates it from standard fandom passion. So what breaks the cycle? What actually breaks it? That is the question I keep returning to when the camera turns off. And I will tell you what I think breaks it. I think the cycle breaks when somebody higher up on the food chain finally says, enough. I think the cycle breaks when an artist with actual leverage in this culture says publicly, on camera, on their own platform, leave my supporters out of this. Do not roll up on Kendrick Lamar's home. Do not jump strangers on my behalf. Do not treat my music or anyone's music as a weapon. I think that is the only voice that can actually cool the temperature down at this point. Because these individuals filming stunts, they are not listening to me. They are not listening to the comment section. They are not listening to journalists. They are not listening to their own families. But they might listen to the artist they are claiming to represent when they film these clips. And that is the only lever left to pull that has not already been pulled. But even that is not guaranteed to work. Because even when artists do speak up, even when they publicly distance themselves from the worst behavior of their fandom, the parasocial contingent does not always accept the message. Sometimes they double down. Sometimes they interpret the artist's disavowal as evidence that the artist is being silenced by the industry. Sometimes they convince themselves they know better than the actual person they claim to be defending. Sometimes they decide the artist is under duress and is being forced to issue the disavowal against his will. That is how deep the delusion runs at this stage of the cycle. That is how far the psychology has drifted from anything resembling reality. And that drift is precisely why I am sitting here tonight telling you that the window for course correction is narrowing by the day. All right, let me bring this back to the practical. Let me bring it back to what we can actually take away from these two clips sitting side by side. As citizens who consume content and shape culture with every click and every comment we leave. Takeaway number 1. Do not roll up on anybody's residence. Not for a joke, not for a bit, not for a viral moment, not for a check, not for clout, not for the algorithm, not for any reason. If your content strategy requires you to trespass on a stranger's property, your content strategy is fundamentally broken and you need to find a new one. Find a new angle. Find a new pivot. Find a new hustle. There are a million ways to make engaging content that do not involve knocking on doors you were not invited to knock on. Takeaway number 2. Do not attack people over music preferences. Not in Toronto, not in Atlanta, not in New York, not in Los Angeles, not in London, not anywhere on this earth. A song is a song. A speaker is a speaker. If somebody's music is bothering you in a public space, walk the other direction. Put in your headphones. Cross the street. That is how functional adults handle sonic discomfort in public spaces. You do not get to regulate what another human being listens to on their own personal device on a public sidewalk. That is not your jurisdiction. That is not your right. And the moment you put your hands on another person over a song, you have crossed from fandom into criminal territory. Takeaway number 3. If you are an influencer, a streamer, a personality, a commentator, a journalist, a podcast host, think twice before you laugh at these clips on your own platform. Think twice before you boost them. Think twice before you turn them into content for your own channel. Because every share, every laugh, every cosign is a tiny contribution to the escalation ladder. And the escalation ladder is not a metaphor. It is a real thing with real steps. And every step gets steeper, and every step gets more expensive, and every step takes us closer to an incident that none of us are going to be able to unsee. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to acknowledge something directly, because I know some of y'all are going to come into the comments and say I am being one-sided in this video. I know some of y'all are going to say I am carrying water for Kendrick Lamar. I know some of y'all are going to say I would have a different tone if the incidents had come from the other side of the aisle. And I want to address that criticism right now, on camera, so nobody can misquote me later. If this exact same footage, the doorstep stunt, the harassment, the public assault over a song, had come from Kendrick Lamar's supporters aimed at Drake's supporters, I would be on this same camera, in this same lighting, saying the same exact thing. I would be calling it corny. I would be calling it dangerous. I would be pointing out the same escalating pattern. I would be reading the same kind of unanimous comment section. Because the pattern is the problem. Not the flag. Not the jersey. Not the artist. The pattern itself. And that is really the whole point of this video. Because in the end, none of this is actually about Kendrick Lamar. None of this is actually about Drake. None of this is even really about hip-hop as a genre. This is about a broader cultural phenomenon where obsessive online communities lose their grip on reality, forget their own boundaries, and start acting as if the internet is a real-life battlefield with real-life stakes and real-life enemies. And when the online battlefield finally spills over into the physical one, and it always spills eventually, real people get hurt. Not artists, not celebrities, not billionaires, regular folks, somebody's cousin, somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody's coworker, somebody's neighbor. That is who absorbs the consequences of this pattern. Not the parasocial contingent making the clips, not the streamers boosting them. The bystander who happened to press play on the wrong song at the wrong intersection on the wrong evening. So take this video for what it is. Take it as a warning. Take it as a mirror. Take it as an invitation to sit with the pattern I am describing and figure out where you stand in it personally. Are you laughing at these clips when they hit your timeline? Are you sharing them with your group chats? Are you rooting for one side to embarrass the other? Or are you the one who is willing to say, enough? We are done. This is not the culture I want to be part of anymore. Because the answer to that question is going to determine what the next 12 months of this feud actually look like. And if the trend line I have been describing tonight continues at its current speed, the next 12 months are going to feature at least one incident that none of us are ready for. None of us. Mark my words on that. Screenshot this video. Come back to it. I will be here. All right, family. I have said my piece. I have laid out the pattern for the record. Now I want to hear from y'all in the comments. Drop a comment down below and tell me, are you seeing what I am seeing? Do you agree that a specific corner of this fandom has crossed a line that should not have been crossed? Or do you think I am off base and this is just standard internet nonsense that will blow over by next week? I read every comment. I respond to as many as I can. Let us have that conversation together in the section down below, because this is not the kind of thing that gets solved by one person talking into a camera. This gets solved by all of us talking about it out loud until the culture shifts. And one more thing before I roll out for the night. If y'all made it this far in the video, that means we vibe. That means we clicked. That means you rock with the way I break these things down piece by piece. So the least I can ask is tap that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next drop. Because I have a whole slate of coverage coming your way this week, including a full breakdown of the industry mechanics that made this beef possible in the first place, plus a deep dive into the parasocial economy that keeps producing footage like the clips we watched tonight. Those videos are going to hit different, and I do not want you to miss a single one of them. That is the read. That is the story. That is the pattern in full color, and it is a pattern that every single one of us has a role in either feeding or starving. I am out. Peace, family. Catch y'all on the next one. Stay safe out there. Do not knock on strange doors. Do not jump strangers over songs. And do not, under any circumstances, let a rap beef between two grown millionaires turn you into a headline. Peace.